All right, we'll call the meeting to order. Todd, you're good to go too, or it's going? I'm going to assume it is. There's no one needs to be excused from the meeting because Hubie will be joining us when he gets back from his other meeting. So the adoption of the minutes from March 25th. Problems, concerns, or a motion? Kelly?
A motion to approve.
Thank you. All in favor of the adoption of the minutes? Opposed? Motion is carried. And call for post-agenda items. Do we have post-agenda items today at all? Seeing no hands, I'll take that as a no. And so we will need a motion to adopt the agenda. Lionel moves the adoption. All in favor? Opposed? Motion is carried. Bylaws for 10:30. I know Devin is coming on for that, so I don't see him.
Two seconds, Molly.
Okay. Oh, there he is. We're a bit early, but if Devin gets on, we'll, there he is. Thanks, Devin.
No problem.
You're not late. We're early, actually. We've already had one whole meeting today and on to the second one, Devin. So, Devin, glad to see that you are well and healthy after a sort of crazy time. Was that just last week?
Yep.
Yeah, out in that storm. So I'm glad we have people like you that want to do those awful jobs on stormy days because the danger is pretty big. So thank you for that.
Oh, thank you.
We are at item 7.1, the boating safety and aquatic invasive species for second and third reading. Devin, I'll let you start, I guess. We're sort of familiar with this.
Yeah, so on March 25th, Council gave the first reading for the updated boating safety and aquatic invasive species bylaw. And then today, we're just recommending to continue with the second and third reading of the proposed updated bylaw.
Thank you. Questions from anyone or a motion? Wayne?
I'll move second reading.
Thank you. All in favor? Opposed? Motion is carried. And so then for third reading, Anne-Marie moves. All in favor? Opposed? Motion is carried. Devin, is that all for today?
That's all I got.
Perfect. We'll let you get on with your day. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Take care.
You bet.
That was quick.
All right. Yeah, that was. At 10:45, we have Cole, but we will carry on. Shannon, are you? Or that one's for later too, isn't it?
We
Does that
could
have-
do by item 7.3.
Okay. Item 7.3, recreation areas, the establishment of. Okay, thank you, Lane.
Okay. So council, we're presenting today a bylaw that I think would go along with what the government of Alberta has tried to introduce when it comes to red tape reduction. We're proposing one bylaw to replace 9 that we currently have on the books. Really what this is just updating the bylaws that provide for formal recreation areas throughout the county. There were 9 bylaws that were adopted a number of years ago. Some of those original bylaws have since been updated, but there is still 9 bylaws on the books. And what we're wanting to do is just move ahead with one bylaw that establishes and continues to carry on the recreation areas as they are right now. The original bylaws provided for a separate mill rate to be applied to each of the recreation areas for recreation purposes. And what we're proposing is just a reflection of what the current reality is, where recreation is funded through the municipal mill rate. What we're suggesting today is that council consider this for first reading, and then we would just go through the notification process to let the public know that this new bylaw is coming into effect. It should have no change, no impact really at all in the way recreation is being funded from that which has been in place for the last few years. I can try and respond to any questions that council may have.
Thanks, Lane. Questions? Clarence?
Well, it's kind of enlightening to me. Read the 1987 bylaws, which govern most of our recreation areas. And we've all, I think, as long as I've been on council, we've certainly been very flexible. I don't think any 2 areas really do it the same way. And I'm wondering, you know, I remember back, you know, and I was chairman of the rec board in Rolling Hills for I don't know how many years. I don't know if there were years when it was only 2 of us on the board and we were just there because you needed an entity. We formed a recreation board, I don't know, way before 1987 when the government was giving out money for recreation. We had to have a structure that they could send dollars to, and that went on for a number of years, probably about 10 to 15, I can't remember. It was a substantial amount of money to start with. But like usual, these things dry up, and then we needed a structure to deal with the county, I guess. I'm not too sure how diligent we were as council ever to make sure that all the structures were perfect and stuff. But when I look at Rolling Hills, I'm even wondering if we really need a rec board, because, you know, I know everybody does it different, and we have kind of a word of mouth, kind of an agreement that for our dollars that come, it all goes to operating and the Ag Society handles it. Are we prepared to go without a rec board and just go through the Ag Society? Is that something that this would allow?
I guess, first of all, the one thing we want to indicate is that this is a recreation area bylaw as opposed to recreation board bylaw. What we're wanting to do is maintain the recreation areas as they are right now. It's acknowledged that each area operates differently when it comes to administering the funds that are allocated for recreation purposes. In Division 1, the Rolling Hills area, it's basically the Ag Society that is looking after those funds and administering those funds. In Wayne's area, there is a separate board that has representatives from 3 different smaller communities. Those individuals allocate the funds. In the case of Bassano, Rosemary, and Duchess, it would be a joint committee with those 3 urban communities. So really, the way the actual funds are dispersed and the way the boards operate is different from one area to another. This bylaw simply establishes recreation areas and confirms that funding is being made available to those areas. That's really the focus.
So operations wise, we just kind of keep on going the way we are. Lane, is that correct?
That's right. We don't anticipate there really being any change from the current arrangements that are in place, other than the fact that recreation will be funded through the municipal mill rate as opposed to a dedicated mill rate that was in place with the original bylaws when they were approved in 1987.
Could I have one more question, Madam Reeve?
Of course.
So if a community wants to, and I'm talking more about those that we, like Rolling Hills, Tilley, Gem, those that are totally on their own, decided they wanted to do something and the recreation dollars from the county were not sufficient, they could ask for a special tax rate still to fund those or not?
The funding that has been made available is primarily for operational purposes. Some of the communities have taken those funds and set them aside to establish a bit of a reserve account that has allowed them to go ahead with some capital projects. But usually the funds that are being made available through the budget right now are intended for operating purposes. The process that we're going through right now, where we're engaging with each of the recreation organizations throughout the county, is to provide some guidance for council on how capital projects could be funded going forward. As council is aware, since 2017, there has been funds allocated to a reserve account. Those funds are intended for primarily capital projects and possibly to offset some of the other commitments that have been made to the urban communities. Now, in addition to tapping into that reserve account, if there's a need for a significant allocation to be made for a particular project, what is being discussed is the possibility of actually applying a local improvement levy to a given recreation area to fund a major capital project. A local improvement funded project places responsibility back on the residents of that area to determine whether or not they're prepared for that project to go ahead and have it funded through the local improvement levy.
Thank you.
Anything else from anyone? Anne-Marie?
Well, Lane answered part of the question I had, and that is about meetings that you have with people from different divisions about recreation. And the discussion is a lot about capital, but would it be smart to maybe wait with this bylaw change until we have a full report back and know what the overall feeling is about recreation and what we need to do?
Brian has his hand up, but Lane, did you want to respond to Anne-Marie first, or?
That could certainly be considered. Really, what this bylaw is intending to do is to formalize the current arrangement when it comes to the actual recreation areas that are in place. It's not necessarily dealing with and making a long-term commitment to how those areas are going to be funded. It simply formalizes the fact that there are separate recreation areas. it may be appropriate to hold off on final approval of the bylaw until that community engagement process is complete. I was certainly anticipating reviewing this with the organizations that are involved in that community engagement process. Our next meeting, session 3, is actually scheduled for next Thursday, and we anticipated the final session, session 4, would likely be in mid-May, after which there would be a final report coming back to council. So we're not talking a significant length of additional time required if we're wanting to have council hold off until that process is complete.
Brian.
Well, and I agree with you, Lane. I think that this is just establishing the areas, and that's been defined. And actually, I think it helps when you're going through your discussion next Thursday, because it's, you know, we've basically defined what those areas are going to look like, and we've given first reading to that, so it gives some direction to that committee also. My other part of this responding was to Clarence. We, unfortunately, it was when you missed your meeting due to your replacement, your hip replacement, that or knee replacement, that we had this discussion, and it's right in line with what you talked about. So just to bring you up to speed, we did have that discussion about doing the offsite levies, and it was in response to what Tilley came to council with, and really to look at reducing some of the mill rate down to not adding any more to the capital fund at this point in time, and leave that and kick that over to the community so that they could, in their own mind, fund the projects that they see fit through that difference between that 0.5 that we currently charge on the mill rate and the actual operating that we would continue to fund. You know, that wouldn't change at all. So anyways, that was just some sort of catch up to speed, Clarence. And anyways.
And that was the concept of having more like a local improvement tax if people were committed in the communities. We'll go to Clarence and then Wayne.
Yeah, I was just trying to wrap my head around it a little bit. And certainly with that discussion, I see this more as a house cleaning, making it a little more concise and putting what we really have already and putting it into one bylaw. And you know, with the addition of the fact that we know we're doing things a little differently now, but as far as it affecting our different areas, I'm quite comfortable that that will remain the same. But I do see a real advantage to designating these recreational areas, and I think it may even help us a little bit when we start talking 10 areas going down to 7, because in the back of my mind, I think there's some hidden agendas there that people think we're doing with recreation and doing that. And I think there's lots of confusion out there. And I do agree with Anne-Marie, we need some real discussion, and it's really, really hard to do that in this environment that we're in today. But I'm prepared to move first reading.
Wayne, he was going to do that too. Yeah, I support that totally. I have no problem doing all the readings. I mean, we don't have to do those today, but to me, it just simplifies. These are the 9 recreation areas. It's reinforces the continuing of those 9 recreation areas at the present time. Any other discussion? All in favor of first reading of this motion? Opposed? Motion is carried. Thank you, Lane. Don't see Cole on, so we will let's just do a couple of smaller items here for a few minutes. Let's go down to item 10.3, the Federation of Canadian Municipalities Conference. Ariana wants us to make some decisions about what we are going to do. So I'd forgotten, last year there was no conference at all. They just canceled the whole thing, eh? Brian?
No, they just moved it to the fall, and it was a virtual one. I attended on behalf of council because I was designated to go in May or June, whenever it was held. So I did it virtually, and you had the opportunity actually to do these sort of town hall meetings with the different candidates that were coming up for representation on the board, and yeah, listen to a couple of speakers. And but yeah, so they did have a conference. It just wasn't in the spring. I don't remember the exact dates, but it was held.
Right. I'm thinking I might have attended too, but I don't even remember. These meetings online all sort of blurred together, but maybe that was AUMA, I'm thinking. What are your thoughts, people? Personally, I am fine not attending an FCM online. It was pretty brutal to attend in person some days. Lionel?
Well, those are sort of my thoughts too, Molly. What are we going to get value out of this, especially going virtual? I'm not so sure, and there's a substantial cost to registering for this. Is it something we really want to attend? Maybe I'm asking Anne-Marie more than anybody else, but.
Well, I thought we agreed we were going to go, Lionel, so let's figure out a way to get there.
Get where?
Get there in person, you mean?
Brian sold his plane, so I guess that option is out the window.
Well, it's all virtual, is it not? It's not a real conference?
No, it's all virtual. So yeah, I don't know. I don't know the value of it. It's yeah, don't know what to say. Brian?
I do find that $670 per delegate is a lot of money for a virtual conference. If you were talking about $100 or, just, the cost, but I find that pretty extreme. Like for something you're not sitting down in a chair and actually enjoying a conference, I find that out of line. Actually, I'm actually quite insulted that they would charge their municipalities that much for delegates to attend virtually. I don't know how anybody would support them.
No, it's like outrageous compared to anything else that's been a conference fee up until now. So that was definitely part of my reaction too.
So with that, Madam Reeve, I'd make a motion, or if you need one, that we abstain this year from attending.
Okay, any further discussion? All in favor? Opposed? Motion is carried. All right, I see that Cole has joined us, so we will move to his item, which is 11.1 on our agenda. Hi, Cole.
How is everyone? Hopefully good.
Yes.
Not enjoying the weather today. I prefer 2 days ago, but what can you do? So if you've taken a look at my report, there's not a whole lot in there, almost nothing. So that's a good thing. We're just doing our spring maintenance like I mentioned the month previous. I do have a small update. As of Thursday of last week, all the sampling hydrants are completed and installed at Lake Newell Resort. So I had a chance to go out there and take a look at them and test them out, and had my operations supervisor go and put some locks on them. So they are operational and installed, and like I said, look good. So I'm really happy about that. But other than that, everything is normal operations. We're just going along as we normally do. So that's all I have for this week, or this month, sorry.
Are there any questions for Cole? Wayne?
Cool. There was some construction in Scandia. They were digging up a part of the pavement there. Was that a water leak, or do you know anything about that?
I know nothing of that. I just went through, we talk to our operators quite regularly, so I'm not too sure what that could be. Off the
It
top
could
of my head.
possibly, it might be a gas leak too, who knows, so,
Right. Jeff obviously knows something. He's got his hand up.
okay.
Jeff?
Was that down near the post office there at that vacant lot, Wayne? No, that would be the only area that I would know of. We had to replace some sidewalk panels after we remedied that lot down there. I'm not sure why or where anybody else would have been digging up asphalt. Do you know the location by chance?
No, but I'll run into town this afternoon or in Scandia, and I'll check it out and get back to you, Jeff. That's okay? Okay.
Sounds great.
Yeah.
Anything else for Cole? No? Can't see any hands. Thanks, Cole, for joining us.
You're welcome.
Have a good rest of the day.
You as well.
Even if it's snowy and the wet's okay.
Yes, we could use it for sure.
Absolutely. All
Okay.
right.
Take care, everyone.
And you too. Thanks, Cole. So, Lane, I'm just making sure before I left the recreation topic that did we finish, or did I finish that off properly? Like we're rescinding and doing another bylaw, or did I leave it too fast?
No, it was handled properly. You gave first reading to the bylaw. Upon
Okay.
third reading, it will rescind all of the previous ones. So we'll be bringing it back for second and third reading in the near future.
Thank you. All right, let's go to where we are on our agenda for, we'll go to ASB update. The soil erosion concerns could be a bit of a conversation. So Todd, are you ready to take us or get us started in that one?
Think so. Is my mic working today?
It is.
Wonderful.
I guess the update is actually first, if there's an update before the soil erosion.
Yeah, I got a little bit of some fun stuff to talk about today, if that's okay with you.
You bet.
Before we get into the less fun stuff, I guess. So we were able to secure an extra 45 cases of strychnine. So we're down to the last 20% getting that out to guys. Pretty excited, everybody that we reached out to again to come and pick it up. You know, 90% of the people were excited to come back and do that, just to get enough to also do some control for next year and a little bit the year after. Moving from Gophers, Emerson, we have just had an absolutely unbelievable amount of phone calls. I was talking to Will a little bit yesterday. He's like 5 to 6 a day, he figures. And we have 8 seasonals confirmed and paid for now. So exciting. We are prepping to open. Of course, we don't really know that that's going to happen, but that is what we're prepping for and really hoping for. We had a really good start to this week. We did the ball diamond down in Rolling Hills. We excavated about 3 inches of sods and placed some baseball diamond shale. So it's nice and red and beautiful, and we finished it yesterday afternoon. did a little bit of leveling, some seeding, and obviously we look like geniuses now because it's raining and it's going to be beautiful and green here right away. So really exciting. We worked with Municipal Services. They had the equipment operators and some of the equipment. So just a wonderful cooperative program, and I really hope that the community enjoys it. So with spring is here now, we have Tina and Patricia starting next week, I believe. We're going to get into a little bit of fencing projects, some brush spraying, and just as the season starts, we're rocking. So pretty exciting time of year. The last contracts are ready to be signed or getting ready to be signed, just with the town of Bazzano, village of Duchess, and the weed inspecting contract for the city of Brooks. So working on those, should be done here right away. And a little bit of a plug, I guess. We have a shelter belt, and what's it called? The Alberta Woodlot Extension Society, or yeah, Alberta Woodlot Extension. We partnered with the County of Wheatland to bring together a shelter belt workshop, and that's tonight. So if you haven't signed up for that, I recommend checking out our social media and signing up for that. And outside of that, I don't know if you guys know this, but we have spent a considerable amount of time talking and strategizing and figuring out the soil conservation conversation that we're going to have today as well. So yeah, that is about my update.
Go ahead, Anne-Marie.
I tried to register a few times for this shelter belt workshop with Gay Mowat. I didn't hear anything back. I didn't get a link. I didn't get confirmation. So should I assume that that would still come today, or is there an issue?
There might be an issue, Anne-Marie, because I got my email confirming my registration yesterday at 4 o'clock. So you did not receive one?
That was with Gay Mowat also?
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. I'll try again.
Yeah, if you don't mind, and if you do have troubles, Anne-Marie, just let me know and I'll reach out to Gay and go from there. Is that okay?
Questions? All right, Todd, looks like we can go on to the next phase here with the ASB soil erosion business.
All right, just pulling up my RFD. This is kind of a big conversation to have, and appreciate everybody taking the time. I included a lot of information for everyone, and I apologize that the video I shared yesterday wasn't able to be seen by everybody, but I'm certainly more than happy to share my screen and show all 4 minutes and 30 seconds of it if that is preferred at some point in time.
Todd, do you want to do that now, seeing as there's a number of people who have given us the thumbs up?
Okay. Just gonna open it here. Whoa. How do I stop? Okay. All right, sorry.
Got tense music accompanying it.
Yeah, very intense. It was a really fun morning last Friday putting this thing together. All right, what can you see?
Nothing yet. Oh, there we go.
Does it say soil erosion concern?
Yep.
All right. I hope that was super loud for everybody else. That was super loud in my office.
Okay, that is quite a dramatic 4 minutes of looking at the shifting soil, I guess. Todd, I'm going to ask for your indulgence because we have the Avail representative here today, and rather than get into a long discussion and then cut it short, I think if it works for everyone, we'll just move to item 8.1, which is a presentation of the audited financial statements on our agenda. And then we can go back to our ag service discussion afterwards. And that way Darren will be able to get on with the rest of his day as well. So Darren, you can hear us and see us and all of those things?
I can, yeah. Hello,
Perfect.
everybody.
Perfect. So, excuse me. Darren, have you presented before with us?
Yes, I have. I think I know I've been there a couple once or at least, or I think maybe twice in person, and then I think last year we did it virtually, if I recall correctly.
Okay, that would make sense. All right. Well, Matt, do you have anything to say, or do we just get right into this presentation from Avail?
We can dig right in. I know Darren has prepared a presentation for us, and I'm excited to hear what he's got to say.
Excellent. Well, welcome today, Darren, and we'll let you get your technology organized, and you can take the stage.
Okay, let's see if this is going to work. If I go here.
Looks like it's working.
Okay, so I've kind of just prepared a PowerPoint presentation rather than going through the actual financial statements themselves. I've just kind of taken some snippets from what I think are the highlights of the statements and some other documents, and then so I'll kind of just go through that. So what I plan to cover today out of the financial statements is the independent auditor's report. Some of the financial results, like I say, I'm just going to hit the highlights. I'm not going to go through every line item by any means. Some of what I think are some of the more important notes to the financial statements. They're all important, but I think for the most part, a lot of them are very self-explanatory, so don't have a lot to add. I do have some graphs that I'd like to share, and there's quite a few of them. I've just picked a few of what I think are the more relevant ones to share, and then I can send the rest. I don't know if I sent those to Matt to share with you yet, but I can certainly send all of them to you to look at. The management letter, if we want to go in camera for that, and then also our post-audit letter to go in camera as well. So does that sound reasonable? Hello?
Yes, it does.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Okay, perfect. Okay, good. I can only see my PowerPoint now. I can't see anything else, but that doesn't really matter. So,
Perfect.
So as far as the financial statements, the most important part from my perspective is the independent auditor's report. That's what you pay us to do, is to do the audit and to provide our report. So this year again, we're giving a clean auditor's opinion. So in our opinion, the financial statements are presented fairly in accordance with the standards. So no surprises. That's exactly what we would expect. The auditor's report points out that management's responsible for the financial statements, the internal controls, and other day-to-day activities. Council is responsible to oversee management, and one of those responsibilities is to formally approve the financial statements, which hopefully we'll do today. The auditor, we have several responsibilities. So some of them are to identify and assess the risk of material misstatements. We are responsible to understand the internal controls of the county, evaluate your policies and estimates, conclude on the going concern assumption, and evaluate the presentation of the financial statements. So none of these responsibilities have changed from last year. It's a standard auditor's report, no surprises, but so it's good if you haven't actually read the auditor's report to read through it at least once, but that's kind of what I think are the highlights there. So getting into the actual numbers, so we'll start with the statement of operations and how did the county do this year. So we'll start with the revenues. So the financial results. So this year you can see revenues are about 38.3 million, down about 3.3 million from last year's 41.6 million. But pretty comparable to the budget. So a couple of the highlights, I guess, the first one is property taxes are down, or sorry, they're up about 1.2 million, pretty comparable to the budget as we would expect. Last year it was reduced quite a bit from the 2018 year, as I'm sure you're fully aware of, and you did get the one-time relief, the shallow gas tax relief. So last year under government transfers, you received about $3.4 million to offset some of that reduced taxation. You didn't get that this year, so overall, that's what the main reason why we're down in revenues. We're a bit better than budget. One of the main reasons there is investment income. So I think the budget is just a bit conservative on the investment income, but we came in about $1.2 million better than budget. If we look at the expenses, this year came in at about 28.5 million compared to last year's 25.8. So we're up about 2.7 million or so, but again, very comparable to the budget. So the biggest change here is basically in wages and salaries. So the wages and salaries were under budget in a few different areas. The biggest area that it was under, I think, was in road, streets, and walks. So here we can see we're significantly under budget, about 1.6 million under. So you budgeted for overtime factor, 8% overtime factor that wasn't needed, and then you were also under budget in gravel and exploration project. Repairs and maintenance and that kind of thing. So there's various other revenues and other expenses that are a little bit different from last year, but the biggest change is in other. So other is up about 2.6, almost 2.7 million, and it's quite a bit over budget as well. So included in here is the discount on taxes. So when COVID hit last year and there was the 8% discount on taxes given if you paid by the deadline. And then there was also tax write-offs as well as uncollectible taxes. So other expenses for all those unusual items are up quite a bit over last year, and basically that's why we're up overall in expenses. So if we take revenues minus expenses from an operating standpoint, we get accumulated surplus before the undernoted of about 10 million, which is about $6 million less than last year, but it's still better than budget for the reasons we just looked at on the revenues and expenses. Then we add in our amounts contributed to other governments. So basically this is the highway paving projects, higher than last year, but not quite as high as budget. We're under budget partly because of the Hort Main pipeline project, which was only started, and part of that will be deferred till next year. And then we add in our government transfers for capital. So when we get government grants that are for capital purposes, we record them down here rather than up above in the operating revenues. So this year was a little over $1 million compared to last year's 842,000. So we had increased capital projects this year, so we had increased revenues as well. So that brings us down to our total accumulated surplus, 295 million, compared to last year's 290.6 million. So we did have a bit of a surplus this year. So then if we look at our statement of financial position, so assets, liabilities, and total accumulated surplus. So the top half of that page is right here. Our net financial assets are about 98.8 million this year, up 5.5 million over last year. So this line here is basically just financial assets minus financial liabilities equals net financial assets. And under the public sector accounting standards, this is an indicator of how well the county is positioned to pay its bills as they come due. You're in great shape. You have a great net financial asset position, and it has improved over last year. Financial assets are up about 3.3 million, and financial liabilities are down about 1.6 million. So the changes in financial assets are cash is down about 15, and investments are up about 18. The investments are still recorded at original cost, and their actual fair value is about 92.8 million. So you have an unrealized gain of about 1.6 million. The standards on that are changing in a couple of years, where we'll when the standards change, then we'll recognize the investments at their fair value. But for now, we still recognize them at cost. So we do have an additional value of about 1.6 million that's not recorded here. Liabilities, the big change here is just in your long-term debt. It's down about 3.65 million or so. You made your regularly scheduled payments. There were no new long-term debt proceeds this year, so no real surprises on the long-term debt or really on any of the net financial assets. So again, net financial assets 98.8 million. So that carries forward. If you go down, then we added our non-financial assets. So non-financial assets aren't cash or expected to become cash. The biggest part of that is tangible capital assets. And you have about 194 million in tangible capital assets, which is down slightly from last year. This year there were about 5.5 million of additions, and then we amortized about 6.9 million. So the tangible capital assets are recorded at their original cost, and then we expense them or amortize them over their expected useful life. This year we amortized 6.9 million. So once all those non-financial assets are added in, we get total accumulated surplus. Again, same number that we saw in the previous schedule, 295 million. It's a pretty big number, and we're not allowed to show the breakdown of that number on the face of the statement of financial position. So what we do is we show all the details of that in the notes. So one of the notes, note 11, shows the details. So accumulated surplus is really made up of 3 different amounts, and the total is the 295 million. So the first amount is unrestricted. So there's a little over $8 million of unrestricted surplus that can be used for whatever the county wants to spend it on. About 99 or 100 million in restricted surplus or reserves. So this is amounts that have been set aside for specific purposes. So between those 2 amounts, it's about 107 or 108 million that's available for future spending. And then 188 million is equity and tangible capital assets. So this has already been spent. There's no cash remaining, but we have the assets. So we have equity in all our infrastructure and buildings and roads. Can't spend that, but we still have the service potential of that. So if you're looking at your total accumulated surplus of 295 million, remember that only 107 million of that is actually available for future spending. Again, there's lots of different notes in the financial statements, and they're all important information, but I'm just kind of picking out the ones that I think are the most interesting or the most relevant. Your debt limits, you're in great shape on your debt limits. So each year, the debt limit changes based on your current year's revenue amounts. So we take your current year operating revenue, times it by 1.5, and we get your total debt limit according to the regulation. That's about 57 million. You actually have about 6 million of debt. So you have, over 51 million of debt capacity remaining. And then on the debt servicing side, it's the same thing. You have a debt servicing limit. Next year in 2021, your total principal and interest payments will be about 2.6 million. So you have, again, a lot of unused capacity. So you're in great shape on your debt limits. One other note this year, although it's painfully obvious to everybody that COVID-19 happened last year and it affected everybody, and it's still going to affect us, and we don't really know what's going to happen in the future. But so this year, what happened was you did have the discount on taxes, which was about 1.8 million. You had almost $750,000 of tax write-offs. You had decreased penalties, so your revenues were decreased. One thing that we didn't record this year, and that's the grant from the federal and provincial governments called the Municipal Operating Support Transfer. And that grant goes up till the end of March of 2021. So it'll be recorded as 2021 revenue. And that'll cover off things like any incremental operating costs or any losses as a result of COVID. So you will still be able to get some of that grant revenue, and that'll be recorded next year. So that's pretty well what I wanted to cover on the financial statements. Maybe I'll just pause there and just see if there's any questions or comments on anything that we've covered so far.
Are there any questions? And if so, just maybe state your name and ask it, please. I can't see the screen very well. No questions? Okay. Darren, I think carry on.
Okay, good stuff. There'll be a chance for more questions after again. So Okay, so one of the other things that we usually do for our clients, for our municipal clients, is we prepare what we call indicators of financial condition. So basically, it's some graphs that show a 5-year trend, and it's got comparables, so you can compare yourself to similar municipalities in Alberta. So one of the lines you're going to see is comparables of same type. So basically, that's MDs and counties with a comparable population. And the population that we've used is anything plus or minus 25% of Newell's population. And so there's 12 different MDs or counties in Alberta that fit that category this year, so Newell, including Newell. So when we look at some of the graphs that we've got, I've selected about 5, and I think there's about 14 or so in our package. So like I said, I'll send those out to Matt, and he can share those to everybody. I know Matt does some very similar analysis already, so it's maybe a little bit of similar to what you're already getting, but I think it's maybe also a little bit different. So on the graphs, there's 4 different lines. The green line is the comparables of the same type, so that's counties or MDs with the same population range. So the green line is really the one that's most appropriate to compare yourself to. The red line is the same type of any size, so it's MDs or counties, but it could be larger or smaller. And then the purple line is comparable size, any type. And then, of course, the blue line is Newell, and it goes to this year, whereas the other lines, we don't have all the information for comparables for the current year, but we can still see the trends pretty easily. So this first graph is comparing the financial assets to liabilities, and Newell's financial assets are about, I guess, 8 times higher than financial liabilities. So you're in great shape, and compared to the comparables, you're also in great shape. Another one I like to look at is the operating expenses compared to the taxable assessment. So your operating expenses this year about 34 million, the taxable assessment about 4.3 billion. So that's the when the assessor each year assesses the value of the property in the county. That's what we use as our measure for the overall economy. How's the economy doing? And if the taxable assessment is going up each year, then that means the economy is humming along nicely. And if it's going down, then obviously we're having a bit of a recession. So we like to compare your expenses to the economy. And if we end up having a flat line, that means our expenses are in line with inflation. You had a bit of an anomaly in 2017 because there was the transfer of the tangible capital assets to Newell Regional Services Corporation, and that was about 30 million. Other than that, if we took that anomaly out, we'd be pretty flat, slightly increasing. So our expenses are slightly higher than inflation, but we'll see when we look at the revenues that it's still in alignment with your revenues. So not a concern. Otherwise, it might be, but because your revenues are also increasing, it's not a concern. Another one I like to look at is the public debt charges to revenues. So your public debt or your long-term debt, next year your payments will be about 2.6 million, and your total revenue was about 38 million. So about 7% of your revenues currently is going towards paying down long-term debt. But if we look at your long-term debt, you have only about $6 million left, and over the next 2 years, about 4.3 million or so of that is scheduled to be repaid. So you'll be down to only 1.7 million or so after 2 years, and so almost no debt. And when you look at the comparatives, you did have a lot more debt than the comparatives 4 years ago, but now you're right back into the mix, and your trend is to continue to get lower. So unless you're going to take on additional debt in the near future, you compare very well to the comparatives. Here's the other corresponding graph, I guess. So here's your own source revenues compared to taxable assessment. So again, we're comparing your revenues to the economy, and if you see yours, you're basically flat or slightly increasing, basically in alignment with the expense one, and pretty comparable to the comparables. And then the last one I have highlighted here is just accumulated surplus available for future use. So this is your restricted so your reserves plus your unrestricted net assets to get total accumulated surplus that's available for future spending. Now it's about 107 million, and you can see that you do compare very favorably to the other municipalities in your categories. So when I look at all the indicators of financial condition, I don't see any red flags or any areas of concern. It looks like the county is doing very well financially. Then I have two letters, and I don't know if you want to go in camera for these or if you want to just kind of carry on.
I think you're all right for this to be in open session. There wasn't anything too crazy in those letters.
Yeah, for sure. There's no concerns really of to be brought up. So okay, I will just kind of go through the management letter. And normally, for a lot of our clients each year, we're going to have various recommendations because we do go through all the different transactional streams. So we go through the various revenues, the grants, the utilities, property taxes. We do the same thing for payroll expenses and your other disbursements, and kind of go cradle to grave and make sure that each step of the way there's proper controls, checks, and balances in place. This year, though, we didn't have any recommendations. So good job on the team. Thank you for all your help. We really appreciate Stephanie and Matt and everybody else for their cooperation. Makes our job so much easier when we have great people to work with. So good job. This is pretty unusual that we don't have any recommendations. So that speaks volumes about your team. And then the last thing we have I wanted to talk about was our post-audit letter. It's another letter that we send out each year to council. There are various things we would note to you if we find them. As you'll see, if you have a look at the actual letter, we didn't find any illegal acts or fraud or have any suspicions of illegal acts or fraud. If we found any, we would, of course, bring that to your attention, and you would have found out about it before today, obviously, but we didn't, so that was good. We didn't have any disagreements with management or any problems in that area. We didn't have any major difficulties during the audit. If we had any questions or concerns, we just talk through them together until we mutually agree on a response. So then the only other thing in there is just some emerging issues. So coming down in the next few years are some changes to the accounting standards. For the most part, these aren't going to affect the county that much. So we have financial statement concepts, financial instruments, asset retirement obligations, and revenue. Those will all come in the 2022 calendar year, your fiscal year. Like I say, I don't think they're going to affect you too much for the most part. And then one other one is financial statement presentation. So that one's still a couple more years away, but right now the way that the financial statements, in particular the statement of financial position, are laid out, where we have our assets, financial assets minus financial liabilities equals our net financial assets, and then we add in non-financial assets. That whole presentation is going to be changing to go back to kind of how it used to be in the old days, where you have your assets at the top and liabilities and then equity. So I think it's a good change. I'm not really a huge fan of the way it's laid out right now, so I think that's a good thing. So that is everything that I had to cover. But I would be happy to take any questions if there are any.
Thank you, Darren. Council, questions? Matt? Oh, Wayne.
On the assessing of our property in the county, we do that. Is there any controls, like can our assessor underestimate its worth or overestimate? Is there some controls over that? I'm not saying there's a problem. Don't get me there. I'm just curious to know if there's any controls over that.
Matt, did you want to cover that? Like from an audit perspective, we really rely on the assessor for his or her values. We don't audit those. We rely on them as the outside expert. But Matt, I don't know if you had anything to add.
Yeah, it's a pretty tight band of control that our assessor has available to work within, and he's audited each year by the province. So he really cannot color outside of the lines, like choose his favorite counselor and keep him happy down in Bow City. Is that what you're kind of referring to, Wayne?
No, what I mean is if our assessment is so high and we get our ratios and stuff that look really good on our audit, that makes the audit look very nice. But you just explained that he's got a very limited place where he can go with the assessment. This is all I'm saying is I just wanted to know if there's some controls.
And if he was trying to impress us, he would be making it bigger than last year, not less than last year, I'd say. Brian.
I don't have a question, but I do have a comment, and I guess the lack of a question basically speaks to the comment in that, you know, we have outstanding staff, and that's basically shows itself in the audit. When you get as clean an audit as this year after year, I always look for a question, but when you get a clean audit, it's pretty hard to say, well, I'm going to pick something apart and ask you a question when it's clean. So congratulations, Matt and Stephanie and your team, and thank you, Darren, for the good audit here.
Thanks, Brian. And yeah, if there are no other questions, I echo Brian's comments. And Darren, it's nice to always to hear good news these days. And so you're obviously doing a lot of online work like the rest of us, which gets a little monotonous. And let's just keep hoping positively that we'll get to be together again in the future.
Yes, hopefully. I totally agree. I mean, it's nice to save a little bit of travel, but also that face-to-face, you can't really beat it. So it's I'm looking forward to getting back in front of people and live and in person for sure. So hopefully that happens before too long.
Yes.
Just a quick comment, I guess. So now that I'm assuming you're going to do a formal motion to approve the statements. So then what will happen from our side is my assistant Rhonda will send the documents to be signed using software called Right Signature. So you'll get an email, your worship, Matt, I think, and then one other counselor. Not sure who you'll choose, who we should send it to there. But you can sign it electronically on your computer. It goes back to Rhonda as a signed document, and then she can send out all the finalized documents that way. So maybe I can just connect with Matt afterwards to get the email addresses and of who should sign. So you can expect, whoever gets those can expect those an email to come from Right Signature, and sometimes they go to your junk email folder, so just kind of make sure that they don't go there. But we still have quite a bit of time before the municipal affairs deadline, so we're in good shape there. So I think that's everything I wanted to talk about.
Thank you, Darren. And yes, you can communicate with Matt in regards to the email addresses or whatever. Is that what we've always been doing? Is it two counselors?
Yeah, so it used to be I'd always come to the meeting in person, and then I would get the CAO to sign the financial information return. And then there's also a page for the CAO or town manager or county manager to sign on the financial statements, and then two counselors as well. So usually I would just get those signed in person when I was there. But now that obviously we're doing everything electronically, it's a totally acceptable way. It's legal, and yeah, it's pretty common nowadays for everybody to sign electronically. Vast majorities of our clients are doing it this year, obviously, and last year we converted a whole lot. So that's one thing I think that probably will carry forward, is a lot of people will continue to sign electronically. It's awesome for personal tax season this year as well, and not only just for financial statements, but for all other legal documents as well.
Yes, I know. It was quite exciting to actually sign something one day in the office when I happened to be there a few weeks ago, rather than just asking the question, may I put this signature electronically on something? So yeah. All right. Seeing nothing else, thanks, Darren. And yeah, have a good rest of the day.
Okay, thank you very much. And if you need me for anything, you know how to get a hold of me.
I think
Bye.
Matt does. Bye-bye.
Bye.
So Matt, we need a motion then to accept the financial statements. Somebody want to bring that motion forward? Lionel will make that motion. All in favor? Opposed? Motion is carried. Just as a note, Councillor Chrisman has lost connection, so she will be trying to get back in, I'm sure. So in case you noticed she had disappeared. All right. So we'll go back to, I guess we'll go back to the, well, maybe we'll carry on with some of the financial stuff and see if we can help have people get on with the rest of their day, seeing as we have half an hour left here. So we'll go on to item 10.1, which is the approval of the 2021 final budget. And if we get through that, we can go back to Shannon's tax rate bylaws, I believe. So Matt?
Sure. So I've got an RFD and a number of schedules in front of council. Typically at final budget time, we don't get too deep into the weeds with the changes. Really, we target, and we have targeted here for our final budget, the same tax dollars that we had targeted at the interim budget. I think we're just about $700 higher, which is really just due to rounding up, 4 decimal places on our tax rates. So we've essentially kept the same taxes in the final budget that we had proposed at the interim. I've summarized some of the main changes there. I do want to highlight, and our auditor pointed it out in his comparison of revenues, the decrease in tax revenues over time. The county is continuing to restrain its property tax revenue budget. We reduced that by 2.33 million or 7.04% in 2020. And we've cut another 140,000 or 0.45% out in 2021. So we're down, 7.5% on the taxes that we are taking from our ratepayers. In addition to that, the final budget includes a discount of 2.5% for those property owners who will pay their taxes by the June 15th deadline. That tax discount comes at a cost of $707,000. Other highlights, I think, would be setting the small business tax rate at 75% of the non-residential tax rate. That's the lowest threshold allowed under the MGA. Overall, the county offers very competitive tax rates. We come below average of all municipal districts when you look at the tax rates offered in all categories for 2020. So I think that's something we can be proud of. We continue to offer some relief to all of our ratepayers throughout the county. If there's specific questions on any of the changes there, we had, I had pitched tossing the paving tax, but we have kept that. So the largest dollar amounts you see there on Appendix D, that shows the changes between interim and final budget by department. The largest dollar value there is just putting the paving tax back into place. So you'll see a larger number in function 0, general government, and then the transfer going back into that reserve in function 32. But apart from that, some minor changes, some carry forwards of the 2020 projects that weren't complete by year end, updating amortization, updating your benefit calculations there. Nothing too crazy.
Thanks, Matt. Questions? Kelly?
Looking at the distribution of property tax levy by department, Matt, and I just have a question over number 74, library, increase in library there. Can you explain that one to me?
Yeah, sorry, that should say culture and library. So the increase there is related to our ICF with the City of Brooks and transfers for some of the community buildings that we agreed to there.
Thank you for that. You'll maybe help me out by putting that culture in there next. Thanks.
Thank you.
Other questions? If there are no other questions, we have a motion to approve the final budget as presented. Brian? We'll make that motion. Any other questions? All in favor? Opposed? Motion is carried. And so if Shannon is still around, patiently waiting, we'll just hop back to item 7.2 and do the tax rates first reading. Item 7.2, Shannon.
Yeah, so I'm presenting the tax rate 2009-21 for first reading. There were no big changes this year. The taxable assessment decreased by 111 million from previous year to 3.87 billion. The increase comes from 57 million in negative growth and 54 million in negative inflation. If the mill rates were not adjusted from 2020, the decrease in the assessment numbers would result in municipal taxes decreasing in the amount of 809,000 or thereabouts. Appendix B in the package explains the details of the assessment changes. The biggest part of that change is the decrease in the linear assessment. Overall, there weren't any big changes this year, which Matt kind of touched on with the budget. The biggest change in the adjustments for the tax rates was the policing costing model, but other than that, that's about it this year.
Thanks, Shannon. Questions for Shannon? Come on, you guys, some really hard ones. Anne-Marie?
Question, I was going to make the motion to provide first reading.
Okay. No other comments, questions, all in favor of the motion for first reading of the tax rates bylaw? Opposed? Motion is carried. Thank you, Shannon. Thank you, Matt. Anything else today, Matt, on that we need for you or from you?
I think that's it on the finance side.
Okay. Well, then we will move back to where we were on the agenda with the Ag Service Board and soil erosion. We had just seen the video, and so Todd, we'll let you carry on from there, please.
Thank you. So yeah, that was a fun video. There's only a short list of music, so that was the music that we got for that. I hope you enjoyed it. So we kind of put together on the RFD was just outlining a little bit of landowner responsibilities under the Soil Conservation Act. Outlined what we currently, or what we have been doing in the past, working individually with landowners that have seen soil erosion happening on their properties. And then inputted a little bit of the discussion just because this is a lot bigger than one landowner at a time. I probably shouldn't go off this too much. So I guess some of the discussion topics come around. We're seeing a little more soil erosion happening in recent years than we have, you know, in the last 15 years. Typically, the costs are very minimal and can be solely borne by the landowner that has seen the erosion occur. What happened on March 29th was a little bit different. So we're struggling at how to find a solution for the problem. I think working with each landowner in this case would be great, but it's going to be very resource heavy. We don't really have a policy that outlines exactly what we're going to implement or how to implement it with each one of these landowners. And I think when we take into consideration, I know I didn't submit any of the locations that Mark and Terry had sent through their tours. I didn't submit those exact locations through that video. But I mean, we're talking from Tilley to Rolling Hills and from Scandia to Rosemary. And that's a large tract of land and a lot of different landowners to make sure we do the same thing with everybody and be consistent. So probably the second step, but the one that's going to be affect me the most is that we have to create some sort of policy that's going to outline how we deal with soil erosion concerns. And I don't know that I can do that on my own. I mean, I'm happy to. Policies are relatively easy to implement to outline how I'm going to do work. But I think it would be short-sighted not to include the people that it's going to affect. So the one thing that I would like council to consider from my standpoint is to appoint an advisory committee under the Agricultural Service Board Act. And that advisory committee would be helping me to create a policy for how we deal with soil conservation down the road. So that's kind of what I have on that. And then I guess secondly, the probably most expensive thing that we have to figure out a solution for is how to get our infrastructure back to where it was on March 28th. And that's maybe a bigger conversation than I know how to tackle. And Terry and Mark are here. We've had multiple conversations about it, but that's why we're here today.
Thanks, Todd. Todd, before I go to questions, my question is, are there landowners that you or other staff have visited with that have comments or have added information to the discussion, or what is the feeling out in our with our ratepayers with what has occurred and what solutions should be, or are there any?
Yeah, I think that's a great question, Molly, and we have had conversations with some. Some of the people that we've had conversations with are the people that had land blowing, and some of the people that we've had conversations with are the ones that have been affected by it. And of course, everybody's got a solution, and that's great. I appreciate all of that information, but it's implementing that solution across our county that's the difficult part. So we have talked to people from Rainier, Scandia, and Rolling Hills. They all, like I said, had great solutions for us to work with. They also had some ideas on how to clean up some of the problem areas that have been identified in that video as well.
And just for everyone's understanding, in the past, the process would be a lot
very
easier.
individually. Yeah. Sorry, Molly. The process in the past was very individually focused. So in the package that I submitted to council, you'll see a presentation that Steve had put together in 2001, and that really from 2001 to 2003 that council and the Ag Service Board dealt with that. And that was the process that got us down the path of working with an individual landowner as much as we can before having to put together a soil conservation order for their property. Because there was an insane amount of administration and legal battles that went into that, and the outcome was not favorable for anybody. Not the landowner, not the council, not for future relations, nothing. So from that, Steve took and passed on to me that we work with every landowner to help solve the problem. So that's been what has been happening in the last 16 years that I've been here, at least 98% of the time. I think we've wrote, I'm going to say, 2 soil conservation orders since I've been here. One was just west of Brooks, and one was northeast of Brooks in the One Tree area. But anyways, long story short, we noticed that soil erosion is occurring. We document what is happening, and then we work with that landowner to come up with a solution. So the solution can be stopping it, and the solution can be fixing what happened. And the difficult part about soil erosion is that each individual time of the year is going to change how you implement a control strategy. So in February is a lot more difficult to control soil erosion than it might be in May or October.
And Todd, what I was struck by in some of the pictures was, like, this obviously is going to have a big impact on drainage in some areas. So it would also involve, like, the EID and some of the stuff they have been working on.
Yeah, and I'm glad you brought that up, Molly, and I probably should have noted that at some point in time in that video. The only thing that we really focused on in our tours was our own infrastructure and the ag land that was mobile. What we didn't really look at was any EID infrastructure or many of the yards that were affected. You did see a few yards in there. Some you might recognize, some you might not, but there's probably countless others, and we've received the emails and the text message and the phone calls from others as well. But we didn't put a lot of focus on all of the other things. We just wanted to outline the problem on our own infrastructure first.
Which obviously makes sense. Okay, Wayne has a question.
Yeah, I got a couple actually, but I noticed in the video quite a few of the ditches look full, but I believe that most of that was dirt on top of snowdrifts, if I'm not mistaken. So a lot of that will be gone now. And my other question is, how far can we go to control this? I mean, we try to work with the landowner, but if they don't want to work with us, how far can we take this? Yeah, so again, really good comments. Wayne, you'll notice in the video, we took a lot of those pictures on the 30th. So the very wet areas, the darker soil, you're right, absolutely. There was snow underneath that soil. The drift sand, and I call it drift sand because it was literally drifts in the ditches, the stuff that was kind of a lighter color. When I dug down into some of that stuff, Wayne, there was 1.5 feet. I got down to my elbow and deeper, and we didn't hit snow, and we never hit the grass yet. So, you know, I agree that there was in those pictures some, but others there wasn't. And just to touch a little bit on the other side, so our Soil Conservation Act and our Ag Service Board Act allows us to do a lot of great things. Not really a lot of great things that we want to do, but it does outline how we can work with producers to stop that from happening, whether it's by cooperation or enforcement. And a lot of this problem now is new equipment they're bringing out, like to work the land. They used to go in the fall and use spikes and bring up chunks. Now they're going in with this fast tillage equipment and they're pulverizing the soil. So they're trying to get ready for spring seeding, and that's causing a lot of the problems.
Other questions or comments? Lionel?
Todd, I was horrified when I read this RFD. We've had experience with soil erosion in the past, and there have been a huge amount of changes. Our technology has improved, our equipment has improved. I thought we had actually eliminated these problems, because in the 80s we had a big concern, but the changes have come since then, and now we're going back to that again. That just, like, that horrifies me. So I'm not going to be very lenient on any producers, any landowners who are not keeping up with the new standards that we've become accustomed to over the last 40 years. We've gone to minimum till, we've gone to zero till, we've left stubble out. We have way, way better equipment today. We used to mow-board plow and leave the soil very susceptible to drift, and those days are gone. And so I cannot be very lenient with any landowners who are not going to keep up with the improvements that we've made.
I don't know if you want me to comment on that. I don't think I can. I think there's a lot of things that we in this county, producers do a humongous amount of things right, Lionel. And I mean, when we were just talking about this yesterday, when Terry kind of ran the numbers, I mean, we're looking at less than 2% of our irrigated producers that may have been affected by this. So there's 98% of them that we didn't notice soil erosion concerns on. So I guess what I outlined in a 4-minute video is not everybody, and it's not every piece of land. And we have some of those producers that have other lands that didn't blow also, right? I guess maybe I shouldn't have even commented on that. But.
No, it's good to remember. Brian, Lionel, Wayne.
And I guess I'm going to come at this from a bit of ignorance, because I don't live in those areas where some of those high value potatoes, sugar beets, carrots live or are grown. And I understand that some of the soil cultivation practices are quite a bit different than what I'm used to. And so, and I don't think it's because of those individuals not doing their due diligence. I think in many cases it's a case of the timing. March rolls around, and some of these producers have thousands of acres to get in the ground, so they probably start too early. I don't know. I really I agree with Lionel in the fact that we have lots of technology that can alleviate some of these issues. I'm just not sure how you deal with some of these high value crops that are being grown in these areas where some of these tillage practices, from what I understand, are necessary in order to get the kind of yields that they're getting. So maybe you can enlighten me a little bit, Todd, on some of those specifics and whether that was the type of land that was probably the most affected by this windstorm.
Great question, Lionel. Or sorry, Brian. I'm not a potato grower. And as much as I know the basics of how to grow potatoes and sugar beets, I don't know the equipment. And I think that speaks to why, to curb the problem, I need the opinions of those people that are producing those high value crops, so that they can tell me what we should be implementing for people that have this problem. Because you're right, we did hear that anecdotally from some of the producers that there was potatoes growing on those lands, and that those potato grounds tend to be more susceptible. There's a lot of dirt work that happens, and if you don't close it up right in the fall and leave some cover or grow some cover, there's potential for this, right? Yeah, but that's why.
So Todd, you've taken me into an area that, so this committee that you are thinking might be helpful is to broaden our knowledge about some things we don't understand, perhaps.
Well, I think theoretically we know a lot of great things, and I mean, anybody can do the internet research and come up with a theory, but it doesn't necessarily mean it's practical. And so, in my opinion, we need those people that are doing the work and have seen these problems occur to tell us what the practical approach is to stop it from happening. Right?
Yeah.
And because, I mean, green cover in the fall, it's an easy thing to say, right? I can say it from here, but maybe it's not always practical on a late harvested potato field. So maybe there's something else that we have to implement on those fields, right? And in theory, a lot of these things are very easy to approach, but maybe it's not always practical.
Okay, so Lionel, Wayne, Clarence.
Just one question, Todd. Are these repeat offenders, or are we dealing more of one-offs that might be a little bit easier to deal with?
Oh, you guys are killing me. Yes, some of these are maybe not necessarily always repeat land, but sometimes repeat renters. So it's similar. Okay. Does that make sense? Land gets swapped lots for different growing, for different crops. And we have a fair amount of rented land. And so some of the same renters are causing some of the same problems, just on different quarter sections.
Thanks, Todd.
I'm trying to be as political as I can here.
You're doing great. We got it. Wayne, Clarence.
Okay, yeah, I know that some of the people who had land moving in that day, and it was terrible. I had a little bit on my own place, and I didn't even work my soil last winter. But my big question is how do you propose we set up this advisory committee? Because I think we got to get after it. And we have to have the landowners input into this, like you're trying to do, Todd, because they're the guys doing the job. So you got to get their opinions. So how do you propose to do this?
Well, I guess the very first step is to make a motion in council to appoint a committee, a special committee, an advisory committee. So that would be step one. And step two is going to be filling it with willing people to help us come out with solutions. And I think those are going to be two different types of people, Wayne. I think those are going to be people that have had this happen in the past and don't like to see it. And I think this is going to be people that haven't had it happen, so they can explain what needs to occur to not see soil erosion.
Clarence and Hubie.
Yeah, I'm not, I think I'm kind of like Todd. I'm not sure what I should say, but, I live on the east end of Rolling Hills. I live in the Dust Bowl. I've seen every quarter section probably in this area blow at some time over the last 50 years. Sometimes shit happens. You can do everything right and it still happens. And I don't think we should forget that. I don't think anybody goes out to purposely have their land blow. I looked, we weren't home on some of those days, but when we came home, I think it was either Wednesday or Thursday last week, and I saw coming towards Bazzano, it was just brown from there on to where we came home. And yet, when we traveled down that Rolling Hills Road, there were quarter sections that I know are pure sand that weren't blowing, and there were others that were. I looked out yesterday just from my little vantage point here in my office, and I know that there are places that are right across from us who have worked their land, which is pure sand, and it wasn't blowing. But what if it had still been in the original position of not being worked, being frozen? Come springtime, all of a sudden that stuff moves. And you know, I don't know how to handle this. I'm really interested in knowing what some of the people were saying to you, how to solve it. Some people are going to say, well, they should have done this or that, and some of the potato land should have been ridged and wasn't. And you can have a winter where everything works great, and you know, if the wind blew today, it wouldn't be blowing, would it? I mean, it's just, I don't know what the answer is. I really, really don't know. And I'd certainly, I know you've had some people make some suggestions, but just sometimes timing just doesn't work. And I don't think we should forget that. And so I don't know. I'm just at loss to say what will work. I think everybody is willing to, you know, do the right things if they can. But sometimes you get a late crop coming off and you don't get to prepare it the way you want to, or somebody comes in and prepares something and it didn't work that way, or you make it ridge for a west wind, and damn it, it comes from the northwest and it still blows. And you know, I don't know. I mean, when you drive the roads around Rolling Hills, I mean, there's sand in all the ditches from 40 years ago. So, but how do you prevent that? So I'm interested in hearing what some of the people had to say, Todd, because I certainly don't know what to say.
Yep, and good comments, Clarence. And I think I'm sure that probably that belt from Scandia towards you has seen land blowing long before I was ever here, and it'll probably be blowing long after I'm here at some point in time or another, right? When we made maybe a mistake and did something we shouldn't have. I guess what we're seeing is just it's happening more often. And I don't want to have the same conversations every time the wind blows. So I think we need we need producers to make sure that these things don't occur. They need to take the proper precautions. So things that I heard is going into the fall, spread manure. You see it's kind of a weird year like this spring, spread manure. If you see your land starting to blow, start bringing up clods. Slow down your vertical tillage machine. You don't need to go 11 kilometers an hour or 11 miles an hour. Maybe 6 is enough to bring up bigger clods. Obviously the stubble, like Lionel mentioned, that's a great way to do it. You know, we heard anecdotally that there was a producer that was going to be planting, I believe it was faba beans, and faba beans are not very tolerant of frost. So that's a late May seeding, but they worked the field twice, placed a herbicide down, a pre-emergent herbicide down, and then harrowed it. So they turned it into a fine powder. And now that land blew onto the south neighbor's property and into his yard. So, you know, there's things that we're doing that we know we shouldn't be doing. It's a gamble. And outside of getting into specifics like that, Clarence, where, you know, before I've had a chance to even talk with some of these guys, it's hard to give every example, but manure is a good one. Sod clumps, or not sod clumps, pardon me, dirt clumps help to reduce that wind speed on the surface. You know, it would be great to have some shelter belts around, but or farmyards to stop some wind. We've lost a lot of those in your area, and certainly that doesn't help. You know, there's a ton of great things that we've just lost over the years, and so I think we need to implement some new changes, because every time the wind blows, I don't even like to look out my window.
Okay, thanks, Todd. Hubie and Anne Marie, and then we'll take a break.
Thanks, Molly. Well, Clarence mentioned the ridging, and a lot of these row crop producers have done the ridging for 25 or 30 years because they want the land ready for the spring, and they put the ridges in to keep the moisture in the land and to stop it from blowing. Then they plant on top of those ridges in the spring to save time because they don't want to work so much in the spring. So that's the practice these row crop guys have done for 25, 30 years. But I was just going to ask Todd, was any of that land blowing that was ridged?
Mostly we focused on our infrastructure when we were taking pictures, and we didn't necessarily note all of the field cultivation practices. One thing, Hubie, that I was informed about from another wonderful producer that was telling us things is there's different potato hillers now and soil preparation things that they're not the same as the old hillers, I guess. I don't know. They maybe make the dirt a little finer or something like that, which doesn't help as much. But if you want to, like, I'll say that yes, there was some potato land that was blowing, but I don't know that I noted specifically that any of it was hilled.
So Todd, when you reference our infrastructure, you're talking about our ditches or borrow pits, whatever you want to call them, that are full of dirt, and so will not serve the purpose of running drainage correctly.
Correct. Yeah. And then there was some pictures there. There was a fair amount of dirt deposited on the road too, which doesn't make for the greatest driving surface. Probably today we'll note it pretty quickly where there was a lot of dirt deposited on those roads. And the only thing I should mention, like, we're not the only municipality, we're not the only area in the province that's dealing with this. Obviously, I've included a draft policy that Lethbridge County was bringing, their Ag Service Board is bringing to their council for discussion. So Lethbridge County's been dealing with these things. Tabor's been dealing with these things. The one day that I was out, I'm going to say that was Thursday, our area, our producers had started to take some remedial actions, and we could see the dirt coming over the Bow River from the MD of Tabor. So it's not all doom and gloom, it's just hard to talk about.
So we've got lots of good topsoil for sale out of our ditches. Anne Marie.
Well, that was exactly my point. Farmers don't want to lose their topsoil. So I think in general we could say that they try to keep that topsoil on their land. And I agree with Clarence. It's a tough one because it will blow, and in the ditch right by a road, it will go, further down. So I think we have to maybe educate a group of people that don't know about cover crops or manure that you suggested. I also think we should keep track of what it costs us to clean our infrastructure, because you need to know. And if that amount is not exorbitant, maybe we can make the decision to not penalize farmers, but just clean up our infrastructure and go on.
It's a great comment, Anne. I think some of the disheartening areas, or maybe some of the areas that experience some blowing are very close to roads that we literally just did construction on in the last 5 years, and that's fairly quick to be back, spending those big dollars cleaning out and bringing that stuff to grade again. bulking soil out is actually probably a relatively easy process for a hoe, but making sure that everything's at the right grade and the engineering and it's going to flow water again when it needs to flow water again, it's a little more finicky of a process. So I suspect it's a lot more expensive to clean up what we have now than it will be in the future when we can make changes.
Okay, Mark, some comments before we break for lunch.
Just, yeah, from the municipal services side, because I'm the one that oversees the roads and whatnot, I don't really know what to say either. But conservatively, if we're going to be looking at cleaning out ditches, it's going to be about $2,000 a day, and we're only going to accomplish about 200 meters a day. And if we're talking 50 quarters of land, and some of that can be on two sides of that land, it's going to come at a significant price tag to clean those ditches out. Like $500,000 or more. And I don't, doesn't feel good bringing that number to council's attention, but that's potentially how significant this may be. This isn't going to be that the county mobilizes and gets it done in a week. This is going to have contracted services written all over it. There's been no discussion with the EID on this and what they see for impact to their drainage network that is not alongside roads and stuff. So I don't know what the total is going to be with this and what the duration it's going to take to get it done, and where council potentially proposes the funding comes from. And that's from my side of things. I will say that because I'm the one that takes roads and drainage, and so I need to bring that to your attention. So there's two matters before you today, which, you know, Todd's taken the lead on it because it's come from land that he's overseeing with Ag Act and stuff, soils conservation. But it's the roads, the transportation, the drainage, making sure that when we're doing our cleanup that we're not damaging our culverts and causing other problems where water is now not draining the way that we had intended, particularly on that stuff that is brand new infrastructure. It's quite disheartening, but along with Councillor Amulong, I completely understand and sympathize with that situation. But preventative, proactive measures in the future, with Todd and the proposed advisory, and also how are we going to deal with operations and cleanup are two things that we need some direction on from council.
All right. So that's good to ponder. Let's take a break until, do you want till 1 o'clock, folks, or earlier? 1 o'clock, good? Okay. We'll see you back at 1 and with all the answers. Thanks, Todd and Mark and everyone.